Okay, I think as time is rolling on, I will just make a start on today. So thank you everybody for coming along today and welcome to this session where we'll talk about returning to using public transport as restrictions ease. Most of you will know me already, but my name is Emma Scott. I'm the Operations Manager at Disability Equality Scotland, and I'm joined by some of my colleagues here today, Fiach, James and Ali, who'll be helping to facilitate today's session. But let me just very briefly explain how things will run today and how you can interact with us. So today you'll notice already we're in a meeting format, and that means that you have the choice to have your camera on or off, as well as your microphone. But can I ask that everyone keeps themselves on mute unless you're invited to speak? This will help us to cut down on any background noise and any distractions. Then you can choose to have your camera on or off, but can I ask that when you're speaking, if you can have your camera on, as this will help us in terms of inclusive communication. We do have some BSL users with us today, and it's helpful for them to be able to see your face when you're speaking. But also when we move into our small discussion groups later on, it is useful to have your camera on, so it's easier to interact with each other when we chat. What would also be helpful is that the name on display on your screen is the name that you registered under and one that we can identify you with. If you're having any trouble with Zoom today, please just type the issue you're having in the chat box in the bottom control panel, and Ali will do his best to try and help you with any issues that come up. As I mentioned, we've got some BSL interpreters with us today, Stephen and Jill. If you do need BSL and you haven't yet told us in advance, then please let us know in the chat and we can make sure that we connect you with the interpreter. We also have live captioning. If you would like to see the captions on screen, you can see them through the closed captions button at the bottom and click on show subtitles. And I can see that there's some information in the chat about switching it off as well. We're recording today's webinar so that we can share the link afterwards. If you don't want to be recorded, then please just keep your camera off. We'll also share a short evaluation survey afterwards, and that will hopefully help us to get some feedback so that we can make these events better in the future. But can I just check then before we get started, can everyone hear me okay? Can you give me a little thumbs up or type a yes in the chat box is great. Thank you everyone. Okay, so just to get started today and set things in context, obviously over the last few months, many of us have not been accessing public transport, but in line with new government guidance, Scotland moved into level 0 in July, and since the 9th of August, the majority of restrictions have been lifted. Now, obviously transport operators are keen to welcome passengers back to the network, but understandably, there are some concerns from disabled people about what that might be like. So today's webinar will give you the opportunity to hear firsthand from some of the operators across different modes of transport about the measures that they have in place to ensure your safety, as well as to tell you what you can expect from their service. So before today's meeting, we asked our members about their thoughts on returning to public transport and how confident they felt about doing that. 28% told us that they felt confident, but that meant that 72% told us that they really didn't feel confident and had some very specific concerns around face coverings and physical distancing, for example, and I'm sure those will feature in our discussion today. So to kick off, we have short presentations from a panel of transport operators, and I'll just very quickly introduce them. Today, we're joined by Robert Burns, who's representing First Bus. We have Paul White from the Confederation of Passenger Transport. We've got Mark O'Malley representing ScotRail, and we've got Billy Robb, who's representing NorthLink Ferries today. So what I'll do first is I'll come to Robert, if that's okay, to give you a very quick overview, and we'll run through that before we open up the floor. Robert, over to you.
Thanks very much, Emma. Good afternoon, everyone. As Emma's already alluded to, restrictions in terms of physical distancing on board public transport has largely been lifted now, and I completely understand that for the vast majority of you, it'll be quite a daunting prospect to head back out and travel about, whether that be use bus, rail, ferry, or any other mode of transport. First Bus has been preparing for quite some time to welcome passengers back to bus, and in line with the relaxation of restrictions on August the 9th, physical distancing on our buses has indeed been lifted. However, we are also aware that customers who have been used to physical distancing for a considerable period of time will be apprehensive about what that means for travelling on buses going forward. And what we've decided to do is keep a number of measures in place which should help to make you feel safe and secure and confident when you decide to come back and use bus services. The most obvious one, a restriction that remains in place, is the continuation of the wearing of face coverings when you travel on public transport. Obviously, if you have an exemption, you are exempt from doing so, but the messaging that First Bus has for the vast majority of customers is to continue to wear a face covering. That will help to increase confidence in everyone on board, and to help support that messaging for those that require to wear face coverings, we've kept notices in place on buses for the requirement to do so. We have on our newest buses audio-visual announcements which remind passengers that a face covering is required. And also, for anyone that may board the bus that isn't evident to be wearing a face covering, drivers will continue to issue a discreet ticket slip to quietly reinforce the message that face coverings continue to be a requirement when you travel with us. There are other things that we are also doing in the background that you won't necessarily see, but you have the confidence that we have safety very much at the heart of the travelling public. Buses are cleaned regularly. We have a daily clean, and that has always been going on, even since pre-pandemic. But we have also maintained enhanced cleaning every night, which means all of the key touch point areas in the bus are sanitised every night on top of the daily clean. And then every 28 days, we are continuing to use an antivirucidal fogging system, which basically kills pretty much every known virus. And that works on surfaces for up to 28 days. So we're doing that every 28 days. And in effect, that's a triple lock on cleaning to keep you safe on public transport. In terms of ventilation, we ask everyone to keep windows open on the bus. Buses go out every morning with their windows open. But to prevent them from closing completely, we have kept in place little window blocks, which if customers do decide to close windows over, they do not close completely, and therefore air continues to circulate and keeps a fresh airflow going, therefore keeping any instance of virus to an absolute minimum. So these are a number of measures that we have in place to keep you safe in terms of if you have concerns still about coronavirus. In terms of planning, we have the First Bus app, which during the first lockdown, we rolled out a seat availability checker, and that tells you how many seats are available on any bus, live and in real time. We have kept that facility going, and despite being back at 100% seat availability, that is still functioning live just now on our app. And for a planning basis, we have also kept on our app and website a seat space checker function, and that allows you to see up to 7 days in advance, based on how passengers' figures have gone on the week before, which buses within hours of the day are busy and which are quiet. And again, we are continuing to update that as a kind of comfort mechanism. So if you see a particular service on a particular hour of the day that appears to be busy, we are able to show you which hours are also quieter to travel, and you can therefore make an informed choice about whether you feel more confident travelling at a quieter time or whether you have a necessity to travel at one of the busy times. And the space checker and the live seat functionality go hand in hand on that basis. So there are a whole host of things that we're doing to support the customer's return to bus. And we very much welcome you back. When you're ready, we're ready, and we can't wait to see you.
Thanks, Robert, that's great. Can I just ask you a very quick question just to clarify that's come in the chat? Does your seat space checker also advise on the availability of the wheelchair space?
Yes, it does. We have a dedicated wheelchair space checker function within the live feed. So for example, if you see the bus travelling along on the map and it says there are 50 seats, there is also a separate line within that bubble that tells you if the wheelchair space is free or not. So we've also maintained that facility.
Great, thanks, Robert. That's really helpful. Lovely. If I can then ask Paul from Confederation of Passenger Transport to come in and give us a little update on what you guys are doing.
Hi Emma, hi everybody. I'm Paul White. I represent the Confederation of Passenger Transport in Scotland. The Confederation of Passenger Transport, or CPT for short, is a trade association that represents a number of bus and coach companies across the UK, including First Bus, which Robert represents. So a great deal of what I might have said, Robert's already said to you, so I won't repeat it. But I might not take up my full 5 minutes, but in essence, I think Robert has done a good job of outlining the kind of mitigating measures that operators are taking to make it safer for travel, so that enhanced cleaning, enhanced ventilation, reduced cash handling in some instances, protective screens for drivers. These are all steps that are being taken, and as social distancing has been relaxed, operators continue to monitor patronage levels and loadings and are reacting to see how the relaxation of social distancing affects the network. However, I fully appreciate that the end of social distancing can be scary and unwelcome to some, and bus loadings, or as they increase, as patronage increases, that might look or make you feel uncomfortable, and we're very aware of that. Operators do monitor the quantifiable data, the things that you can quantify, the figures, but the kind of qualitative work that Disability Equality Scotland provides in its reports is also very useful to provide that kind of context, that emotional context that we should all be very aware of. It's worth noting that bus network is around about 95% of pre-COVID network, so it's not a case that as loadings increase, we have a number of extra vehicles or a number of available drivers to increase frequencies and lessen average loadings. We're at from almost pre-COVID levels of providing the network, so it's worth bearing that in mind. Although I know that for some that might seem a good solution. I like that Robert highlighted the good work that's available in the First Bus app. I'm always very passionate to advocate the Travelling Scotland app as well. The Travelling Scotland app collects data from operators such as First Bus and from local authorities, and can provide that connected view. So maybe if you're taking a journey that involves a change of bus and you want to know what's happening in various services or from various operators, that can be useful. And for those operators who, like First Bus, that provide passenger loadings, that information is also available on the Travelling Scotland app. I've been reading the Disability Equality Scotland reports, and I found it very interesting to read about the impact of the Spaces for People's projects and fears about vehicle accessibility, accessibility to bus. Some of the evidence gathered around floating bus stops, as I've described, or as buses being unable to pull into the curb to let people access them if they make full use of maybe raised curbs or wheelchair ramps. And I am supportive of active travel and some of the work that Spaces for People have done, but I would say that in this instance, some of the schemes were entered into quite quickly through lockdown with maybe inadequate consultation, and we're seeing that the results of that. So as we encourage people back onto bus, we're also working on other fronts. We're also working with Transport Scotland to introduce the Bus Partnership Fund, which should see more priority measures for bus, more accessibility, faster running times, benefits for bus users, and those will be done in a holistic measure, looking at all over transport planning, and so should work in conjunction with measures for active travel rather than competing against, which will hopefully you'll see that the benefit of that in the coming months and years. Other than that, I think Robert covered a lot of what we're doing to hopefully make it ease your worries, which are fully understandable as bus loadings increase, and as Robert says, we hope that you'll feel confident to return to bus in the coming weeks. Thanks so much.
That's great, Paul. Thank you very much. That's really helpful. Just one further question on the wheelchair space checker. Robert, Paul, maybe both of you could come in on this. There's a question about its reliability. There's been some feedback that perhaps it's not as up to date as it could be. Is there any way of improving the reliability so that people can make an informed decision about which bus they get?
Right. So the live feed is based on the driver counting passengers on and off the bus. So in terms of live, it's as live as it gets because it's real time. But if there has been an instance, for example, where a wheelchair user has tried to board a bus and the wheelchair space is already taken, it would really depend on the situation. If it's a non-wheelchair user that's in the space, then as per the relevant guidance and legislation, a driver will ask a passenger to move to somewhere else within the bus if there's room. However, if it's an example where a wheelchair user has arrived and there's another wheelchair user on, it could well be a simple error that the driver has made as counting that person on as a passenger rather than a wheelchair user, and therein comes the anomaly. So what we can do though is remind drivers to be careful and to remind them that the wheelchair space use should be recorded correctly so that we get as best a customer experience for everyone as possible.
If I could add to what Robert said there, which is absolutely spot on, that unlike some of the other modes that may speak today, bus stops are incredibly frequent in some urban routes. So if you check the app, like I might do, and then walk 2 minutes to my bus stop, the bus could have stopped a number of times and between that and the loadings will change.
Yeah.
So it's worth bearing that in mind.
Lovely. Thanks both, that's helpful. Let's move on then and hear about trains. Mark, can I come to you now from ScotRail?
Of course. Hi everyone. I'm Mark O'Malley, the Customer Experience Strategy Manager representing ScotRail today. You won't be surprised to hear that ScotRail is taking a similarly cautious but confident approach to how we are adjusting the customer experience as we move from level 0 to the further easements on restrictions that occurred on the 9th of August, and we've made good progress in doing so. If you're travelling with ScotRail in the near future, you will see that we are still carrying out our enhanced cleaning regime at all of our train stations and on board our trains. In many instances, we have people actually travelling on the train and cleaning it as it is in motion, to give that extra level of confidence that the trains are kept in a very hygienic condition. You will notice as well that our station environments are returning to something of normality. And by that, I mean, you will see that where we have ticket gates installed at the station, that every single gate is available and in operation, unlike every second gate, which caused queuing because of physical distancing. You'll notice that any extra queuing system or one-way systems that were in stations have been removed. And you'll also notice that the station entrances and exits have returned to normal too, which means that once again, the stations made easy accessibility maps on the National Rail website are accurate as to the environment that you will be travelling in. Like other operators, physical distancing has also been removed on board ScotRail's trains. However, our customers who are able to wear a face covering when travelling with us are still encouraged to do so. And that is communicated to our customers through our marketing, through our announcements, and through the screens that we have in stations and on trains. So if you're travelling with ScotRail, some things you'll notice in the coming weeks are that on Monday, the 23rd of August, we will be reopening our first class carriages on board our trains. And very soon afterwards, we will also be removing the cordoned off area on board our trains, which is being used for our conductors and our ticket examiners. And that means that approximately an extra half carriage of seats will be available for our customers to use. We will also be reintroducing our allocated seat reservations for services departing from the 25th of September. It has been a while since we've had allocated seat reservations available. So for those of you who haven't travelled with us in some time, just for clarity, allocated seat reservations are where we offer you a numbered seat in a numbered carriage printed on a ticket, and that is for our longer distance services. We've also created information on our website to identify our busy trains, which will likely have fewer seats on board. And this is designed to keep customers who still have, legitimate concerns about crowding levels and physical distancing. It's designed to keep those customers informed about our busy services and which ones to avoid. We are progressing really well with a programme of disability awareness training. Every single frontline team member of ScotRail will go through that training, and we are due to complete that by the end of February, toward the end of March 2022. One thing I'll leave you with, however, which is not particularly good news, is that Sunday strike action, which is resulting in a severely reduced timetable on Sundays, it will be around for a while longer. So far, that strike action is confirmed up until early October 2021. So this means that we will continue to ask our customers to check their journey in advance before travel, and we'll make sure that any customer who has made arrangements for passenger assistance on a Sunday is contacted when we know about strike dates, so that we can make any adjustments required to their travel plans. That means we can still keep our customers moving, but taking into account the fact that the original train service we might have thought was running has subsequently had to be cancelled. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. That's really helpful. And just finally then, I'll move over to hear from Billy Robb from NorthLink. Billy, over to you.
Okay, afternoon folks, and thanks for the invite there. And basically, there's quite a few sort of common denominators to say what Paul, Mark and Robert has already said, and what we provide ourselves at NorthLink Ferries. We reopened our bookings to full capacity this month, but what we've actually found is it hasn't really changed that much in terms of sort of forward bookings. People who've already made the bookings, and we're sort of in terms of like car space and how many cabin availability we have, we found that the bookings haven't changed that much. So there's, we're still running, at the minute probably 50% capacity, even though we've opened up. We have also in 2019 introduced the change in places facilities. We would hope to see, make people aware we've got that. If you go into the website there. Also, if you want to have a look round the boat before you go on it, you can go into Google Maps and have a go on there and have a look around the whole vessel. So if you haven't been on one of our vessels before, you can do that. The actual booking website has just been upgraded as well. So if you I keep pushing, you want to have a look in the website as well, you can increase the text size, enhance the colouring. You can have a audio recite, and if even you wanted to actually download an audio file for future reference, you can do that on the website now. So that's and that's only been introduced in the last month. So please have a look at that if you get time. In terms of services on board, there hasn't been a great deal change, and we've extended our opening hours, but the cleaning regimes are still the same. As in the buses and the rail, you're still required to wear a mask when you're moving about. So that hasn't changed. Our cleaning regime, we do the fogging. We have a cleaning teams on board every day going through all the cabins. So it's been quite intense. So yeah, it's interesting days ahead for us. We'll all like to see a bit of normality, but the main message is we want to keep everybody safe. And we're sort of keen to, we've done it so far. We're a lifeline service. We're to the islands, and we want to sort of keep, avoid any sort of cancellations, because if crew members caught COVID and we had to cancel sailings, then you can expect a sort of knock-on effect that would have. In terms of other enhancements, we're trying to make a better experience for the passengers. We're refurbishing cabins, and just for a better experience, accessibility as well. And we're always open to new ideas. We're working with Fish as well on the Hate Crime Charter, so we're making quite good grounds there at the minute. So, and that's ongoing. We're also looking at putting more enhanced and larger TV passenger information screens on board the vessels. So that's an ongoing project at this end. So yeah, we've got, even though we've been sort of quieter passenger carriings, there's still been quite a bit going on behind the scenes. But at the end of the day, when somebody's traveling, from door to door, they're going to use a train, they're going to use the bus to go to the ferry, so we've all got to, be on the same level and try and keep everybody safe.
Great. Thanks very much, Billy. That's helpful.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you. So we're now going to break out into our small discussion groups to give all of you guys the chance to have your say. Now, each group will have a facilitator who has some kind of key questions that they'd like to cover. We have 30 minutes set aside for discussion, and then after that there'll be a short 10-minute comfort break to allow you all to gather your thoughts before we come back into a kind of feedback session and the chance for any final questions. So in just a moment you'll be moved into your discussion group. You might be asked to press a button or so, but any questions at all, let Ali know and he'll be able to help resolve things. Thanks, guys. All right, thanks everybody. Thank you for your contributions during those little discussions. Let's just run through and hear from each group. Just a quick reminder, if everybody can just stick themselves on mute while we go around so we don't get any background noise. And I'll come to James first of all, if that's okay. James, do you want to tell me a very quick overview of your group, if that's okay?
Yeah, not a problem. And thanks to everyone in my group for their contributions. We talked quite a bit about face coverings, and in terms of recent experiences of people getting back and using public transport, that there appeared to be a lot of people who were maybe not necessarily complying with the requirement to wear a face covering. However, there was also recognition that for people who are in the exemption category, so that also led to a discussion around how that information is best communicated. with the general public. And we talked about having posters which make it very clear that, of course, we have to comply with the ongoing mandatory use of face coverings, but also that these posters make it clear that people are in the exemption category. Because as we know through Disability Equality Scotland, we've had people contact us saying that they have received abuse for not wearing a covering, even though they're in the exemption category. So I think it's just being very clear with the messaging to raise awareness of face covering exemptions. But there's also a training element within that as well. So we talked about how members of staff, if they are aware of the face covering exemptions as well, and for that to be communicated to passengers. So that's also really important. But yeah, and just in terms of other things, we also talked about physical distancing and reflecting again on how public transport and things become a lot busier now. Things are opening up. Maybe a lot more people are traveling to work peak times. But it was just looking at people's experiences of that, and it's with modes of transport. For example, a person had used a train, ScotRail train, and it was very busy, and it was looking at what could providers across all modes of transport, what could they do to maybe limit the number of people that are getting on trains or buses, because it did feel a little unsafe. And in that particular experience, I think people had been standing in the aisles, for example. So is there a way to limit the number of people? It gets to a point where if there is no available seats, then should people be getting on to the bus or the train or any other mode of transport if it just doesn't feel safe? And I'm just looking through the other points that were made as well. And just regular cleaning, again, that was discussed for the providers at the beginning, but just ensuring that does take place, and that will again help people to feel confident and return to public transport. Yeah, I think that covers the main points from my group.
Thanks, James, that's helpful. Fiona, can I come to you? What did your group have to say?
So obviously there's quite a bit of overlap there, and we did discuss face coverings, but actually not that extensively, and there weren't really strong feelings about that, other than some discussion around the different sort of types of face coverings, and how wasteful it is using the the sort of the disposable ones versus the sort of reusable ones, which perhaps people forget to wash, quite frankly. And so there was a bit of discussion around face coverings, but I think the points that we covered most were around apprehension and anxiety about travelling again since the pandemic, and particularly on longer journeys or new journeys. So perhaps the shorter local journeys that people were familiar with were, okay, but people are wanting to visit their family, or catch up with people that they haven't seen for a long time, and longer, newer journeys to visit family, for example, in England, were really proven to be quite very stressful and anxiety provoking, and the sort of safety measures, I guess, that the transport providers were discussing earlier do go some way to alleviating those fears, but it is maybe about a wider understanding from staff and probably public that for a lot of people, traveling by public transport now is extremely anxiety provoking. So quite a lot around that, and also some discussion around the use of taxis to alleviate certain parts of the journeys. Quite a bit of discussion around connecting journeys and changing between modes of transport. So how do you get from your house to a bus stop, then change to a train or a ferry? A lot of discussion around that being quite difficult and sorry, just getting distracted by the chat panel. Some chat around passenger assistance not being available during, you know, changing between different modes of transport. And finally, I think we discussed a bit around technology and the double-edged sword that technology is either fantastic or very difficult to access for some people. So yeah, I think that's the very whistle-stop tour of our chat.
Thank you, that's great. Olivia, can I come to you and hear from your group, if that's okay?
Absolutely. So, we kind of discussed actually completely different kind of things. So we talked quite a lot about trains and stations, and about because a couple of members of our group either have visual impairments or work alongside people with visual impairments. We kind of talked about the importance of audiovisual announcements, how much information we need them to have. We had a little discussion about whether there is getting a little bit too much audio clutter, but actually the visually impaired amongst us kind of put us straight that it's actually really useful to have as much information as possible. And in the same way that we can filter out visual clutter, they're very good at filtering out kind of audio clutter, but that sometimes on trains there are malfunctions and the audio and visual information isn't always quite right, and that they really need drivers and conductors to listen to and see that and pick up on it and right those faults as quickly as possible. Because if you're relying on the audio announcements and it's telling you you're coming up to such and such station and you're not, you know, it can really make or break a journey. We discussed whether face coverings made it more or less difficult for people with visual impairment to communicate, but I was told that actually you can't always tell if someone's wearing a face covering or not, and the muffling isn't always actually too much of a problem when you're in a more quiet space. And also that those with a visual impairment aren't really aware how much physical distancing is going on. So it's either something you don't worry about at all or something that probably others find anxiety provoking, as they don't know whether people are wearing face coverings or giving them space. And also that the readiness for staff, especially to kind of offer an arm and help, is less than it was, and there's been a lot less staff in stations. And one individual was saying, especially after the Scotland-England football match, when everyone went to London, everyone came back with COVID and everyone was self-isolating, the amount of staff in stations massively dropped, made it really difficult to kind of get assistance. There was also discussion around how cleaning, you know, deep clean should always be a priority, not just a COVID thing, and that they probably should have been here before and hopefully will be here to stay, because knows we're now getting colds and coughs and sneezes, and the deep cleaning really needs to continue. And some people mentioned that on not all services, even if you travel in the morning, can you tell that a deep clean has happened? And it's whether is it being done efficiently and effectively, or actually are people making a mess immediately. And we did really, we touched on sunflower lanyards and whether they're being used as they should be, whether service providers are talking about them enough, and whether actually they could be used more efficiently and effectively. And also we did just say that we need to start revisiting our more old school accessibility information. So our timetables, where are they? Are they printed big enough? Are the colours and correct? Because although the apps and the websites are getting more and more accessible and containing more and more information, there is a big chunk of the community that can't access those, so that we maybe need to not just put all of our money and effort time into these new and amazing ways to make things more accessible and to make journey planning easier, but make sure that our old journey planning and information provision doesn't just get left behind, because it will leave a lot of our kind of customers behind. And then finally, we talk about spaces for people, especially because of the knowledge of our visual impairment in our group. as a group, especially negatively affected by some of the changes that have been implemented. And for us to continue as transport providers to feedback any feedback we get, into the local council and into the people that we know, to make sure they are getting an overall picture on the positives and negatives and who is affected. I think that's a drive-by kind of tour we kind of chatted about.
That's lovely. Thanks, Olivia. So yeah, can I come to you now and hear from your group, if that's okay?
Yes, thanks very much. So we had a real breadth of experience represented in the group, which bore itself out in terms of the discussion that we had, from different disabled voices to a range of policy expertise too. So possibly just to offer a counterpoint, we heard quite a lot in our group that people's experience of traveling during restrictions had perhaps been even more positive than it had been previously. And so people encountered less busyness, greater availability of accessible transport support, and people were around and easier to access to get the support that we needed to make journeys as smooth as they could be. And there was a considerable amount of anxiety expressed about returning to going back to breaking point, essentially going back to a public transport system that was under the same amount of pressure and stress as we had witnessed before lockdown, where it was back to standing room only, where there was challenges in terms of securing the access support that was required while making journeys. We sort of organically then went on to talk about what the opportunities were to make things better, and about a real golden opportunity which is on the horizon in terms of rail transport in the future, with discussions well underway in terms of renewing the full fleet of trains across Scotland, and that allowed us to envisage a utopian future with a gold standard in terms of accessibility. And so building it in from the first nuts and bolts essentially of this new fleet, striving toward level access at all stations, and striving toward a level of service provision for disabled people which looked beyond the current suite of legislative requirements to what would be the requirement of people in Scotland with disabilities in 40 years' time, because the fleet that's being procured and designed at the moment is going to be with us in 40 years' time. What will our population and demography be at that time? We identified a number of examples of good practice. Mersey Travel was used, and we came to rest on the critical nature of working directly with DPOs, disabled persons organisations, and disabled people themselves, and people with lived experience who are willing to support with helping to reimagine and redesign and procure new trains, for example, which have us in mind, and which meet the requirements of a travelling public of the future.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful. I won't give a full update from our discussion, but I think essentially we focused very much on the attitude of transport staff and how that can have such an impact on whether on the quality of your journey and also the likelihood of travelling again. I think some members of the group had some negative experiences, and then we talked very much about the need for driver training and how that needed to cover lots of different types of disabilities, particularly making sure transport staff understand the kind of the challenge that disabled people face and the impact that that can have on their ability and the desire to travel, but with the caveat that any kind of engagement has to be delivered with and by disabled people, and that there needs to be some sort of constant engagement between transport providers and the service users. And we've had a lot of access panels giving their time and effort to say that they're available to help facilitate that. Thank you everybody for your time and your contributions today. Were there any kind of very final questions with just 3 minutes to go? Claire, you've got your hand up.
Yeah,
Claire Sweeney, do you want to come in very quickly?
Really quickly, just about booking continued travel throughout Scotland into England, and booking seat reservations using your national entitlement card. There seems to be a bit of disparity. You can do it for like CityLink, but you can't do it for ScotRail. And again, to do that in person is a massive equalities issue. You know, if you need to travel to book tickets to travel, it's something that I would like to kind of see addressed. I know that ScotRail say that it's to do with the kind of boundaries put on by local authorities, but if CityLink are doing it, then that doesn't marry up. And it could be that local authorities are giving different information to different companies. Okay. I don't think there's, but yeah, I think it's a huge thing, especially with stations not being manned. So your local station, which might be accessible to you, if you need to go to a larger station where it is manned, it's massive quality issue.
Okay, thanks for that, Claire. Mark, I don't know whether you want to respond to that now, or is that maybe something that you're happy to pick up with Claire later?
Yeah, could we potentially use you, Emma, and as a feedback mechanism, and I'll take that away and have a look at it. Yeah, it doesn't sound right to me either, so let me investigate at my end. Thanks for raising it.
Thank you, that's great. As always with these things, time runs away from us, everyone, but thank you again for your time and your contributions today. We will take all of your feedback and the discussion points away, and we will produce a short summary report that we'll share with our colleagues at Transport Scotland and also with yourselves in the coming weeks. As I mentioned, you will receive a short feedback survey, so please do take the time to tell us what you thought of today's event, and we will be able to use that information to inform our future webinars. So finally, just a thank you to our presenters today, to our communication support, the BSL and the captioners, to all of our facilitators who gave up their time, thank you, and to all of you for your time and contributions, thank you very much for your efforts today, and we hope to see you again soon at one of our future webinars. Thanks everybody, bye-bye now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, bye.